On a Paris runway in 2006, pale blue light spilled across the catwalk like winter dusk. Among a procession of models gliding past like apparitions, the audience suddenly fell silent. A girl emerged. Hair like white gold brushed against hollow cheeks, eyes so faded they barely held color, and a face entirely expressionless. This wasn't fashionable aloofness. She didn't gaze. She didn't engage. She didn't exist in the way others did. She walked like a memory you're unsure ever happened. Her name was Vlada Roslyakova. Her beauty wasn't seductive, nor fierce, nor elegant. It was unreal, as if a cursed porcelain statue had awakened in the postmodern fashion era. In a world obsessed with perfection and performance, Vlada became something else entirely. A living doll, they called her. But was anything truly living behind those eyes? Few knew she came from Siberia, a place where winter never ends and silence is a survival language. It was from that remote, frost-bitten world that a girl named Elena emerged. Not to be reborn, but to disappear. She did not conquer fashion in the traditional sense. She haunted it. And in doing so, she carved her place in the silent corridors of the 90s Supermodels legacy, not through glamour, but through stillness, through becoming an icon of absence. Omsk, a forgotten city, buried in the belly of Siberia. No fame, no flash, no dreams, broadcasted through glamorous lenses. Only wind, snow, rows of gray concrete apartment blocks, and a silence so sharp it could slice skin. It was here, in the early 1982nd, that Elena Roslyakova was born. From her first years, she was not like other children. Her family lived in a cramped third-floor flat. Her father was a civil engineer, her mother a primary school teacher. They were strict, reserved, always shadowed by a quiet fear of money, of failure, of vanishing in a forgotten place. In the Roslyakov household, no one spoke of dreams, only of responsibility, caution, and survival. And Elena, Lena, as they called her, grew within that thick atmosphere like a pale flower in frost. Frail, soft-spoken, translucent. At 4 years old, she could sit by the window for hours watching the snow fall. No tears, no laughter, no words. She wasn't drawn to dolls or toys. She preferred blank pages and pencils. Her earliest drawings were always faces without eyes. School was a different kind of storm. Elena didn't blend in. She didn't join games, couldn't act normal. Her classmates called her ghost girl, dead-eyed doll. Some teachers suspected a developmental disorder. Her mother refused. "She's not crazy," she said. "She's just different." That difference became a shadow. While post-Soviet society tried desperately to define its new normal, Elena slipped further away from it, but in that isolation, another world formed. She chronicled her dreams, captured fleeting feelings she couldn't name, etched vague visions as if she were both alive and watching herself from afar. One evening, a Western fashion ad flickered on their aging television. It lasted just seconds. Models, lights, the Paris runways. But it stunned her. Not because of glamour, because of the silence in their eyes. She didn't know the brand, didn't understand the language, but she felt an eerie connection, as if to whisper, "There, I wouldn't need to apologize for being quiet." At 13, her body changed in troubling ways. She grew rapidly, becoming painfully thin. Doctors warned of malnourishment, but somewhere deep inside, Elena wasn't alarmed. A thought emerged. Maybe my body is preparing for something. At school, nothing changed. She was still the strange girl. But in the mirror, Elena began seeing something else. A face that didn't quite seem real, translucent skin, angular lines, eyes that didn't belong to childhood. Not classically beautiful, not adorable, but haunting, unmistakably different. Her mother often scolded, "Why do you stare at yourself so long? Vain already?" She didn't answer. She wasn't admiring herself. She was trying to confirm whether she still existed or if she was already fading. That difference rejected in one place might just be the exact thing another world was waiting for. In the reflection, she saw not a pretty girl, but a question mark the world would one day need to answer. And Elena, who had spent her life being called emotionless, was slowly becoming Vlada Roslyakova, not to live a new life, but to step out of the one that never truly fit. When that woman approached them in the small supermarket in Omsk, no one could have predicted how a fleeting moment would mark the beginning of a new life. She wore a long coat, her hair tied tightly back, eyes scanning with purpose like she was searching for a shape among the crowd. When she stopped in front of Elena, her mother instinctively stepped between them. "Your daughter," the woman said, "has a very rare face. She could go far." Elena's mother frowned. "Who are you?" "I used to work with an agency in Moscow," she replied without hesitation. "I know what the industry is looking for. This girl, she's what they want." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't show fear. But something in her eyes flickered for the first time in years. That night, their dinner turned into a quiet war. Her father slammed his spoon down. "My daughter is not going to be a model. It's all scams." Her mother said little, cutting meat with mechanical precision. But Elena was somewhere else already. A switch had flipped in her mind. A new corridor had opened. She started sneaking into a local internet cafe surrounded by teenage boys gaming and couples whispering behind screens. She didn't know what to search for. But when she typed "model casting Paris" and saw her first runway images, she whispered, "I've seen them before, in my dreams." Weeks later, the woman followed up, a formal letter. An invitation to a closed-door casting in Moscow with scouts from Tokyo, Paris, and Milan. Her parents chuckled until they realized Elena wasn't laughing. She was packing. She borrowed a pair of heels from a distant cousin, too big, and taught herself to walk in them, pacing the dim hallway of their building. At first, she stumbled. Then she found rhythm, not graceful, but persistent, determinate. Her mother relented under one condition: don't quit school. Whatever happens, don't let this ruin your future. Elena nodded, but deep inside she knew. This was the door, and once it opened, she wouldn't return. The night before the trip, she wrote in her journal, "Some people are born to stay in one place, others can't, not because they're strong, but because they're disappearing." In Moscow, she was lost among hundreds of girls, each perfectly styled, confident, and trained. Elena wore an old dress, her hair untouched, face bare. A few glanced at her with thinly veiled pity. But when she stepped onto the runway for her test walk, the room stopped. She didn't pose. She didn't pivot. She simply walked forward, eyes unblinking. The silence was deafening. A Japanese scout leaned to his assistant and whispered, "She looks like something from another realm." She wasn't chosen for Paris, but she received a formal offer from Tokyo. The agency asked her to change her name. Too many Elenas in the system already. Vlada, they suggested. It felt like a stranger's name, but also like a door closing behind her. She stared at the plane ticket for a long time. It didn't reflect her. It reflected something beneath her skin, something waiting, and maybe something the world wasn't ready to recognize. It was the dark side of fashion calling not the glamour, but the part where the misunderstood, the too thin, the too silent, are finally given a stage. And Vlada answered. Tokyo, 2003. A 16-year-old girl, barely fluent in Japanese, arrived in the world of professional modeling wearing borrowed heels and eyes veiled in fog. In her first few weeks, Vlada got lost on subways, survived on instant noodles, and shivered inside a rented capsule apartment in Shibuya. But when the lights turned on, she transformed. No one quite knew what to call her. Ethereal, doll-like, ghostly. None of it was enough, because Vlada didn't just possess beauty, she brought with her a feeling, a chill. She became one of Asia's most sought-after new faces. Magazine covers, lookbooks, runway shows from Kyoto to Seoul, from Osaka to Hong Kong. But all of it was just a beginning. When she received the call to appear at Paris Fashion Week, she froze. Backstage at Dior, The fitting room was a converted cathedral, arched ceilings, dim corners, the smell of lacquer and perfume and sweat. Vlada sat in silence. No one paid attention until she walked. From that show on, her career exploded in what could only be described as a silent detonation. In 2004, she walked in over 70 shows in one season. Chanel, Valentino, Christian Lacroix, Alexander McQueen, Lanvin, Victor, and Rolf, if they sought to manifest unreality, they called Vlada. But Vlada didn't walk like the others. She didn't sway, didn't perform. She glided. A silhouette, a vessel. Her eyes remained still. Her face was ice. And the audience dared not blink. Karl Lagerfeld once said, "She's like the first snow untouched." John Galliano designed a sheer ash-gray gown specifically for her, just transparent enough to let the light pass through. Lanvin's Albert Elbaz whispered, "She doesn't pose, she just is." She wasn't friendly. She didn't chatter backstage. She didn't do interviews, but she was unforgettable. People began to use strange language to describe her. Safe, yet threatening. Fragile, but commanding. Makes you want to protect her, yet you fear touching her. Not everyone admired her. Some editors called her too distant, too lifeless. But that was exactly what designers needed: a living canvas to paint fantasies on. Vlada didn't resist. She simply existed without flavor, without rebellion, but impossibly compelling. In 2006, she became the global face of Nina Ricci, a house synonymous with soft spirits and ethereal femininity. In her campaign, she appeared to rise from petals and mist. No longer a model, a symbol. Even among dozens of tall, delicate models, when Vlada walked, time seemed to stall. What people felt couldn't be described as beauty. It was closer to something spiritual, alien, beyond reach. A fashion critic once wrote, "Vlada doesn't walk. She floats like a spirit yet to be exorcised." For 3 years, she ruled fashion not like a queen, but like a phantom. No one knew what hid behind those eyes. Maybe not even she did. Because Vlada wasn't playing a part. She was the part. She was the unspoken current that ran beneath the surface of the 90s Supermodels' legacy. The reminder that beyond power and glamour, fashion also longed for absence, for silence, for ghosts. Some rebel with noise, others with fire. Vlada Roslyakova rebelled with silence. No declarations, no campaigns, no speeches. But every choice she made, every boundary she drew, was a quiet act of resistance in an industry that devours compliance. At the height of her fame, Vlada was approached by a major American fashion magazine. They offered a high-concept nude editorial shot by a world-renowned photographer. 6 figures, a cover feature. For many, it was the transition into legend, a way to join the pantheon of untouchable muses. She declined. There was no official statement, no dramatic post, just a single photo uploaded to her personal feed, her hand resting over her bare chest, lit by dim window light. The caption, written in Russian, read only, "I do not belong to someone else's gaze." Some critics called her ungrateful. A few editors labeled her too cold or unwilling to evolve. But backstage, among the younger models, the story spread like wildfire. To them, she wasn't just a model, she was proof that no was still a word that could be said. Not long after, she turned down a cosmetics campaign linked to a company previously accused of animal testing. Despite assurances of policy changes, Vlada refused the deal. "I'm not an activist," she said in a rare interview, "but I can't put color on my lips knowing it cost another creature its silence." Another time, she shared a private email from a prominent designer who requested she lose 2 more kilos for an upcoming haute couture show. Her reply, "I won't burn my body to keep your ambition warm." The sentence spread like wildfire in the model community. A mantra, a shield. Vlada didn't chase titles. She refused to be branded as a feminist symbol or a trailblazer. She declined interviews that framed her as an outspoken rebel. For her, every decision was simply hers. And that was what made the industry respect her and fear her. Because they couldn't control her. They called her the untamable Muse, a face too sacred to exploit, a body too independent to style, a presence that couldn't be bought. In a world where everything has a price, her silence was unaffordable. That's why even without television shows, brand ambassadorships, or a curated online persona, Vlada remained a whispered legend, not because she shouted louder than the rest, but because she knew when not to speak. She didn't rewrite the rules of the 90s Supermodels era. She simply refused to follow any of them. And that refusal was enough. No one knows exactly when Vlada Roslyakova disappeared. There was no scandal, no announcement, no farewell, just one day. She was no longer there. No runway appearances. No campaigns. No magazine covers. It began like a whisper, easy to miss. But soon those in the fashion world started asking, where is the pale girl with the doll's face? When no one had an answer, the name Vlada drifted back into memory like a beautiful ghost no one was certain had ever existed. Her Instagram stayed open, but desolate, sparse, like an abandoned room, a blurred window, a crumpled book, a dried flower. No captions, no hashtags, no explanation, only and fading. Some believed she had slipped into depression. Unconfirmed reports suggested a clinic in Lyon, France. A friend, perhaps the last one still in contact, shared this. She didn't scream, didn't collapse, but one day, she looked in the mirror and said she couldn't see herself anymore. Not her face, not her purpose. After years of camera flashes, runway chaos, and relentless schedules, it was as if Vlada had lost her own frequency. Every word felt empty. Every step, automatic. She wasn't living. She was maintaining an image. In a rare 2016 interview, when asked about her absence, she answered simply, "I needed to hear my voice again." She never returned to Omsk. She didn't choose the bright cities. Some say she lives near the French-Italian border now in a foggy village with slate-roofed cottages and overgrown gardens. She paints, tends to vegetables, feeds stray cats. She lets no one photograph her anymore. One magazine sent a photographer for a chance encounter, but upon seeing her from afar, he left. She looked too still, he said later. Like a sculpture placed in a world still spinning. There was a time when her footsteps could quiet an entire room. Now, she chooses to live so softly she barely leaves a trace. And no one blames her. Some even say, maybe disappearing was the bravest thing she ever did. A handwritten note once circulated among fans said to be from Vlada, though never verified. In soft Russian ink, barely legible, it read, "I used to be an image. Now I only want to be a person. No one knows if she will return." Strangely, no one insists she must. Because in her absence, she left behind something that couldn't be filled. Not a vacancy, but a haunting. A reminder that beauty doesn't always need to be kept. Some things are meant to vanish. And in doing so, they become legend. When people speak of legacy, they usually mention numbers. How many covers? How many runways? How many brands? But with Vlada Roslyakova, no one remembers the statistics. What they remember is a feeling. The stillness when she stepped onto the runway, the way light scattered across her translucent skin, the emptiness her expression carved into a room full of sound. She didn't speak. She didn't perform. And yet, she appeared like a dream one you know you've had, but cannot fully recall. She didn't reshape the fashion industry through manifestos. She didn't lead revolutions or stand at podiums. But by refusing, by withdrawing, by disappearing, she created a new kind of myth, a beauty that no one could cage, a silence that no one could exploit. And perhaps that's why, even in her absence, the name Vlada never truly vanished. Because how do you forget something that was never meant to stay? And if one day, through the fog, she were to step back into the light, would we still be quiet enough? to feel her,